Perhaps at this point I should say that I was born and bred in Southampton, and that when I was training to be a minister, I did my placement in Plymouth, in Devon. We have this little joke between us, Melanie and myself, in that Melanie, when training and since entering into ministry, has managed to go to conferences in Jamaica, in Guyana, in Switzerland, in Germany, I think. And I've managed to go to Manchester and Cambridge. So it's lovely to be in Fiji. Anyway, about 5 years ago, we said to our church in the United Kingdom, United Reformed Church, which is Presbyterian, Congregational and Churches of Christ together, that we were willing to go abroad and serve abroad for a period. And we were hoping to go to India, because we've, for several years, supported projects in India, and we've visited several times. I've been 5 times, Melanie's been 8 times, and worked in India. So we're hoping to go there. But that didn't happen. And then about 2 or 3 years ago, we had an email message one day saying, "There's a job in Fiji, would you like that?" So that's sort of how we got here. And it took about 12 months for all the process to go through, getting all the work permits and everything else, but we arrived here literally about the 3rd of April last year, flying via LA, and then landing in Nandi, where as COVID, or the crisis at the time was coming to the end, we had to, on landing in Nandi, spend 3 days at a hotel in quarantine. After a 48-hour, whatever it was, flight, it feels like 48 hours, I think it was less than that, but it was so lovely just to be able to acclimatize and take time to get used to the area. Anyway, I'll tell you a little bit about where we're based and what the college is doing, to give you some sort of sense of what we're up to here, and really just to ask for you to remember us in your prayers. When you wander back to where you've come from, please do remember us and pray for us and pray for the work that's going on in the college. So Pacific Theological College, that's a picture of all of us in blue. We, thank you, glass of water. The college is all in blue there, and we actually, during the week, we have on Tuesdays where we wear green. I've failed today. Melanie's okay, just about, I think, sort of. But on Tuesdays we wear green because the college is transitioning into university status, and that's green for transition. On Thursdays we wear black, in line with the Thursdays in Black Worldwide campaign by the World Council of Churches and others to stand against violence against women. And on Fridays, we normally wear blue, because that's remembering our connections with the ocean. And if you actually look at a proper map of the world, which is turned the right way around, and if you see the Pacific Ocean, you won't see hardly any other countries. The Pacific Ocean is so big. But our perspectives, and this is something that I think I've learned, and Melanie's learned a lot in the last 12 months or so, is our perspectives are so Western-centered, and they need changing so that we actually take care, or we think about those that are from smaller parts of the world, what we perceive to be smaller parts of the world. So the college's motto is to develop PTC as a premier regional theological institution for leadership for justice. And we're training students to become transformative leaders in their churches, in their communities, as consultants, and the focus is very much on leadership, justice, and spirituality. And there we are. We're right by the sea. Look at that. But we wouldn't dare go swimming in that water. It's part of the port area of Suva and is rather dirty and nothing like the water that you see around you in Nandi here, where there are some of the best beaches on the island. But that's the college campus. It's about, I think, something like 30 acres in size in total, something like that. And we have about 47 students resident on site at the moment. We have about 16 faculty houses. We have the building on the left-hand side of the picture here is our mission centre, where we have conferences, and we quite often have the Fiji rugby team staying and the Fijiana rugby team staying, and they practice on our football field, which is a little bit too energetic for me. You sit there and watch and wonder where your life's gone to. Okay, next one. So the college was established in 1965 following extensive consultations held with Pacifica churches. It's the only ecumenical college in the whole of the Pacific region, in Pacifica. It's owned by 20 churches from 16 different countries, from 6 different denominations: Methodist, Anglican, Presbyterian, Congregational, Lutheran, and Uniting churches. So it's a good mix mesh, to put it mildly. We have a truly international staff team, so we've got on the staff Fijian, Samoan, Papua New Guinean, Indian, Australian, British, Canadian, and they are representative of the Methodist Church, the Congregational Church, the Catholic Church, the Anglican Church, the Lutheran Church, the Baptist Church, and the United Reformed churches. It's a good job we get on well with each other, isn't it? And what our focus is as a college is on Pacifica whole-of-life education. A little bit, as Melanie's mentioned already, promoting ground-up education, inclusive theological education, being communities-based and informed, strengthening decolonization, contextualization, and pacificness of learning in all aspects of life. So this whole concept of, as Melanie was saying earlier, theological education tends to be from the top down. It also tends to have been probably from the white European or Eurocentric based education systems as well. So we're looking to try and make sure that the education given is Pacific based from a Pacific context, and also looking at how do we actually engage with the communities that we're working in and developing communities based education. We're also looking for Pacifica regional stability, trying to broaden and strengthen ecumenism and regionalism to include those core pillars of culture, spiritualities, and philosophies, and for the sake of the stability of the whole Pacifica ecological household. And there's so many issues of social justice around the Pacific region. I mean, I have learnt so much in the last 16 months. You know, I only found out fairly recently when I attended a protest against the nuclear situation in the Marshall Islands, that it was something like 180 odd nuclear devices were tested in that region. And people were still suffering cancers and other things as a result of that. People have still not been able to go back to the land that was their home, or the island that was their home, because of that testing. And until now, no compensation has been given. We're looking at focusing on Pacifica holistic well-being, promoting development frameworks and models that are resilient, communities-based and sustainable for Pacifica communities. Climate change is a big issue in this area. Even in Fiji, the whole of Kiribati as a community, they've already bought land in Fiji to move their communities to when their islands disappear. And in Fiji itself, we already know stories of some communities that have had to move because of climate change, so they've moved inland, and then they've found they've had to move again because of the erosion of the coast. And there are issues that the government has to deal with here, as well as the issues that the church can help with. We're looking for transformative leadership for justice, promoting transformative theologies and leadership with advocacy and prophetic missiology, and focused on creating just and sustainable, resilient communities. A bit like the journal that Janet mentioned earlier, there is a Pacific Theological Journal, which hasn't been published now for the last 3 years, but there are several copies of that over the years, which, if you can get hold of a copy of any of them, which should be in any good library around the world, then please do. You'll read some very interesting theology and some theology that sort of makes you think. And we offer courses at all levels, from certificate level right the way through to doctorate level. Melanie's working at the moment on developing a certificate in communities ministry for, in particular, women in the region, but also for men as well, to actually hopefully develop. And that's aimed at getting people that haven't got any or very limited schooling experience to come and do some studies. Do you want to share a little bit at the moment about your story about the women?
The story about the women, well, which story about the women? That's, I would almost like to know what you're aiming at, but what I will say is that the way that a lot of teaching happens in churches is quite traditional. So, for instance, all the women in the churches will be very familiar with the story of the Samaritan woman at the well. And they will know that with Jesus you will never be thirsty again. They will have no concept whatsoever about what the point of it being a Samaritan woman was. They will have no concept at the idea that Jesus in public, having a conversation with a woman of, in that time would have been a questionable background, in midday, when you were not even allowed to hear a woman's voice in public, how absolutely transformative that was. And so when we first arrived, and on my first day in the office, there was a little knock on the door and saying, you know, when is the Women and Theology course starting? Well, that was quite difficult because I couldn't actually find the course materials because it hadn't been run for about 6 years. But when eventually I did track them down and managed to run the course, at the end of the course, one of the women, and this will stay with me, effectively, she said, "I'm really glad I've seen this and heard this, and I understand this now, how I understand how Jesus particularly was with women. And I understand now that it is possible for women to be ordained, and how they were working with Jesus and with the early saints in the churches. This is going to make it so much harder for me when I return home. But I'm glad I know it. But I'm glad I know it." Is that the kind of story you were thinking of?
That's one. You might be allowed to tell another one in a minute. So, at the moment, studies are currently undertaken in person for any of our courses, but we're working toward having all our courses available online as part of our transition to university status. And courses that obviously the college run depends on who applies and what can be available at any particular time. And as I said, we are in the process of transitioning. So the council, these churches every other year, the church leaders gather together as the council of the college to make decisions about how the college is run. And they agreed a strategic plan for 2020 to 2025, which included that the college would transition to become the Pacifica Communities University. This was originally an idea which was kicked off in about 2010, 2011, 2012 time, but took a long time, as I know a lot of these processes do, to actually start to reach fulfillment. But over the next 18 months, effectively now, because we're already halfway through that strategic plan period, we're going to be setting up 3 schools. The School of Theology and Ecumenism, a School of Ecology and Resilience Development, and a School of Pacifica Philosophies, Education and Sciences. And in addition to that, we're setting up various new centres. We've already set up the Institute for Climate and Indigenous Knowledge. And that's a little bit about trying to actually look at what the people on the ground already know about how to deal with changes in climate, how to deal with situations that are happening on a larger scale. And the sense is that the global debate about climate change, although still not many governments in the world are doing anything about it, is at a certain level, but there's an ignorance or a lack of knowledge of what people on the ground who have been migrating, been moving, been changing their practices over the years could actually be adding to this debate. We've also launched a PTC Press, and I think we've already published about 4 books in the last 6 months since launching that press. So we're trying to actually generate or share the theology that's coming out of the college with other people. The 2 books that were first published, interestingly, were a book by a woman on ordained ministry in Samoa, who is a woman who's married to a man who, when she published her book, or effectively did her PhD, was then kicked out of the church in Samoa. And so they're now ministering together in New Zealand to the diaspora communities there. We've had some very good conversation with her and her husband, and he's quite good at buying beer, so that's also helpful for me. We've also, Melanie's Centre, which when we came last year was called the Centre for Women, or the Women's Centre, has now been renamed and rebranded and is being reshaped to be a centre for gender and social justice. And the whole concept of gender very much in the Pacific region is still very much male and female, not much further than that. But interestingly, I think as Brian mentioned yesterday, there is this tradition of intersex or something like that in the Pacific region. So it's an interesting conversation. And we will be launching over the next few months Centre for Enhancement of Teaching and Online Flexible Learning, which we hope will be the core of our reaching out more worldwide. An Institute of Regional Leadership Development, which is going to be headed up by somebody that's just about to complete their PhD here. And also a Centre for Research for New Pacifica Consciousness. And there's a short list of some of the courses that we've got running: certificates in spirituality and justice, communities ministries, pastoral counselling, theology. And we're also starting next year, I think. Next slide. No, we've got a Bachelor of Divinity running. We will have a Bachelor of Ecumenism available from next January. And then also we're setting up several new courses, one postgraduate diploma in ecumenism, and also several master's courses in climate justice, gender justice, ecumenism, philosophy. I can never remember them all, so I'm glad they're up there on a list for you. Human rights, leadership for justice, and whole of life development. So we've got a whole massive program of new courses that are going to be coming in over the next year or so. So we've got many people at the moment writing those courses and trying to get things going. So this is my promotional push. Look, you see, you're looking for a new transformative theological learning that is whole of life, ecumenical, justice-driven, and communities-based. Then come to PTC. If you go back one, there's a very special person in this picture apart from my wife. It's Patrick, isn't it? Can anybody see Patrick? Is he there? They won't be able to see him. Can you see Patrick? Can everybody see Patrick? He's Patrick the Passover Lamb. So he's right in the middle of the picture, and it's one of the ways that Melanie's come up with a great idea of partly trying to get the women to talk, because that's another issue we face quite often. And it's not just women, it's also, if you're in a group like this, if you say to somebody, if you ask a question, it's very difficult to get feedback. People aren't very forthcoming in coming back to you. Not like they are in UK congregations most of the time. But it takes time to get them to talk. So Patrick was partly developed as a method of encouraging them to talk. So they can talk to Patrick about the question that Melanie's asking. But also there's also the fact that Patrick is male. The Passover lamb had to be male. And there's that whole issue of male patriarchy. that begins to be addressed by using Patrick. I think that's enough about what the college is doing. Is there any more slides? I don't think there is. That's a lovely picture of us again. Oh, that's a picture of the beaches that you'll pass as you go along the island as well. Just to encourage you. Thank you.
Mark, what degree do people typically have to have for ordination?
Ordination in the Pacific depends on the church. So I should have said, we've got about 47 students on campus at the moment. We also have students who are studying by extension. Those 47 students come from different places. We've got 7 students doing Bachelor of BD, Divinity at the moment. 4 of them are from Kiribati. Kiribati, generally, most of their ministers will only have got a diploma. So they've only got to diploma level. So they've come to us to do their degree. So that's upskilling them. And that's partly what PTC has done over the years, is basically upskilled. So we've got a few people already who are doing their doctorates with us, partly so that they can then go back to their own theological college in their own country to then be able to teach a master's, so that their theological colleges as well can be lifted up. And that's something PTC has done over the years very well, is gradually lift up people so that they can go back to their own countries and then develop the theologies in their own countries. How many women students have we got? 11, as a rough guess. 11 out of the 47 are women, including 3 of them doing PhDs, I think, at the moment. I think we've got 3 doing PhD. One lady is from Vanuatu. She's doing something on the issues of gender in the church in Vanuatu. And she's quite scared that when she's written her thesis, how her church back in Vanuatu will respond to that. And different churches in different places in the Pacific have a different approach to women's ministry. And it's even in the Anglican Church, I think it is called Anglican Church here, yeah. The 2 dioceses, we're in one diocese here in Fiji, but if you're in the Solomon Islands, you're in a different diocese. This diocese has got quite a few women ministers, or vicars. The Solomon Islands has none, or has one that was ordained in England, but that's it. They do not ordain women in the Anglican Church in Solomon Islands. Yeah. Fascinating. Yes. Any other questions before you pop off and go to the Hindu temple? Stunned them into silence. It's like it is an audience in Fiji. It's been quite a journey for us. I think the interesting thing as well for us is on the theological spectrum is that the theology at the college is, I would say it's fairly radical, but equally it's also, there's an anti-feeling in that Western theologies are perceived as, because they were, the theologies that the missionaries brought have partly led to the patriarchy that we see around us. And so with the right sense of injustice, they look at Western theology as being a certain way and therefore something that we need to be rethinking about. But we keep trying to say to people that actually a lot of Western theology has moved on. Not everywhere, but a lot of the stuff that Melanie and I tend to spend our time reading is just as radical as what we're hearing being taught at the college, and trying to encourage them to actually engage. We need to be talking together as a world, certainly to deal with the issues of climate change at the moment. We need to do that together. Okay, thank you. And thank you for letting us have you with us for a couple of days.